This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar say they will form a government. The UN calls for a new approach to the refugee crisis. And Somalia installs CCTV cameras in Mogadishu streets to boost security. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. The details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Ramanyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
That's right, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Nigeria's headline inflation rises to 11.9% due to border closures. And the IMF has agreed to extend a $370 million credit line to the DRC. We'll have the details of those stories and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we begin in South Sudan. President Salva Kiir and the opposition leader Riek Machar have agreed to a new deadline to form a unity government. The date is now set for the 22nd of February next year. The two sides have spent the past several days in the capital, Juba, to resolve long-standing disputes. There are still three main issues: the integration of security forces, security arrangements in Juba, and determining internal state boundaries. This meeting comes after the country missed the November 12th deadline. Forming a unity government is a part of the latest peace deal and the second in the last 4 years. While President Salva Kiir and his counterpart Riek Machar are both facing international pressure over faltering peace talks, the United States has now imposed sanctions on two more South Sudanese government officials. They are the Minister of Cabinet Affairs and the Minister of Defense.
Government team has already started.
Dr. Martin Elia Lomuro is the current Cabinet Affairs Minister in South Sudan. He was in exile in London, where he went in 1989, soon after the military takeover in Khartoum. He only returned to South Sudan in 2005. Dr. Martin founded a political party known as South Sudan's Democratic Front, or SSDF, in London, and he is the current chairman of that party. Martin Elia's party, the SSDF, is allied with the South Sudan's ruling party. He has held several ministerial positions, including heading the Ministries of Agriculture and Parliamentary Affairs. He is also the current secretary to a body set up to implement reforms before formation of a unity government. That body is known as the National Pre-Transitional Committee. Meanwhile, Kwal Manyang Juk is a general in the South Sudan's People's Defense Forces. Kwal Manyang was elected a governor in Jonglei State in 2010, where he served until he was appointed a Minister of Defense and SPLA Affairs in 2013. South Sudan's government says it will hold a meeting and decide on the way forward in regard to the U.S. sanctions imposed on the government officials. Juba says it remains committed to improving its relationship with Washington. Patrick Oyed, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has urged the international community to carry out new strategies to improve the global plight of refugees. Guterres was speaking at the Global Refugee Forum in Geneva, Switzerland. The forum seeks to transform the way the world responds to refugee situations. His sentiments were echoed by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, who is also calling for international cooperation in order to improve the refugee crisis.
Dear friends, the Global Compact on Refugees is our collective achievement and our collective responsibility. It speaks to the plight of millions of people, and it speaks to the heart of the mission of the United Nations. Throughout human history, people everywhere have provided shelter to strangers seeking refuge, bound to them by a sense of duty and humanity. Solidarity runs deep in the human character. And today we must do all we can to enable that humanitarian spirit to prevail over those who today seem so determined to extinguish it. We cannot afford to abandon refugees to hopelessness, nor their hosts to bear the responsibility alone.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would be naive if we ignored the reality. The protection environment today is complex and troubling. We see refugees who have fled for their lives being demonized and turned into figures of fear. We see people making political capital by stoking public anxiety and directing it towards some of the world's most marginalized and vulnerable people. This is not only immoral, but narrows the space for practical solutions.
Well, let's cross over to Geneva. CGTN's Julia Lyubova is joining us on the line from Geneva. Julia, can you give us an update on the latest on that meeting?
Well, that's right. So the first ever Global Refugee Forum is indeed underway in Geneva, and today, Tuesday, was the high-level segment. So the session opened by speeches from Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, and also the High Commissioner for Refugees. But as well as those UN leaders, we also had leaders of Turkey, Ethiopia, Pakistan, Costa Rica, and Germany. Of course, Turkey is a country that hosts the most refugees from Syria. 3.7 million refugees from Syria are currently in Turkey. So this is why President Erdogan came to Geneva to address this forum and to also take part in many discussions that have been going on all day. So indeed, the plenary sessions have begun. They will also continue on Wednesday. There will be many discussions, many events to discuss ways on how the lives of refugees around the world can be improved. It's things like education, access to healthcare, access to jobs. Of course, many refugees around the world, they don't even have any ID documents. They don't have access to jobs and education. So this forum is designed to improve the situation and find solutions on how to make this happen. And this is what's been happening on Tuesday and will also continue on Wednesday.
Well, Julia, the UN Secretary General has urged the international community to carry out new strategies to improve the global plight of refugees. What are the key areas of focus at the summit, and what will be the expected outcomes?
Well, indeed. So, of course, there are many expectations from this forum. It's the first time it happens, and of course, what we've heard from the UN Secretary General's speech is that he said that the amount of refugees around the world have doubled over the last 30 years. So it's indeed a very serious issue, and of course, there are many issues involved with this. So one of the main issues that have been expected and discussed here is the financial pledges, and already the World Bank and also various governments have donated money financially. But it's not just the financial issues as well. It's, for example, the legal side. So, for example, on many ways to ensure that the human rights of refugees are being upheld, that the situations with access to various things like education and jobs are being also upheld. So, as well as government leaders, we also have business leaders here and representatives of the civil society. And all those business leaders will be discussing ways on how to produce jobs for refugees and how refugees can be useful in their communities, how they can integrate more. So all of this is designed to find solutions for that. And of course, indeed, as well as hoping to help to improve the lives of refugees, also it's one of the main issues is to prevent more refugees from happening in the future, of course, because with 70 million people around the world are displaced through war and conflict, and 25 million of them are refugees. And of course, this forum, well, it aims to find solutions on how to improve the situation for them around the world.
All right, Julia Lyubova joining us there from Geneva. Thank you. Now, an unprecedented 71 million people globally have been forcibly displaced. Hundreds of thousands are forced to flee their homes every day due to conflict or persecution. Africa currently hosts over a third of all the displaced people in the world. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi takes a look at the continent's refugee situation.
Sub-Saharan Africa hosts more than 26% of the world's refugee population. Over 18 million people in this region are of concern to UNHCR. That number has soared in recent years, partly due to ongoing crises in the Central African Republic, Nigeria, and South Sudan. It has also grown as a result of new conflicts erupting in Burundi. The Central Africa and Great Lakes sub-region is characterized by multiple complex conflicts, resulting in both internal and cross-border displacement of people. Currently, the Congolese IDPs and refugees form the largest displaced population in the sub-region, with close to 4.9 million internally displaced people and over 500,000 refugees and asylum seekers in the neighboring countries. The eastern Horn of Africa continues to be unstable due to ongoing outbreaks of violence, terrorism, floods, droughts, as well as social and political crises. The estimated number of people of concern to UNHCR in the eastern Horn of Africa sub-region in 2019 stand at some 14.1 million. In 2019, the sub-region is expected to host an estimated 4.6 million refugees and asylum seekers, mainly from Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as an additional 9.5 million internally displaced people in South Sudan, Somalia, Sudan, and Ethiopia. Now, there has been an increase in the number of people of concern in the Southern Africa sub-region, largely due to the influx of refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo to neighboring Angola and Zambia, as well as to other countries in the sub-region. Now, ethnic violence, intrastate conflicts, and extremism continue to generate internal displacement and parallel influx of refugees across West Africa. Now, since January 2018, the total number of new internal displacements in Nigeria alone increased by over 214,000, with an additional 238,100 in Cameroon, close to 162,800 in Chad, and some 104,300 in Niger. Now, current intervention in all these crises is geared toward building institutional capacity of African countries aimed at enhancing active and long-lasting humanitarian and development assistance. Back to you.
Daniel Arap Moy there with the refugee numbers. Now, with the first ever Global Refugee Forum underway in Switzerland, the African Union says it hopes the two-day meeting will trigger inspiration on how to end the causes of forced displacement across Africa. Here's CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi with more.
Ethiopia is home to over 700,000 refugees who have mainly arrived from neighboring countries. The influx of refugees has led the country to implement a law that is allowing migrants to leave the camps and find work.
We need to integrate our refugees in the society. There should be a social integration, there should be economic integration. They are human beings, they can work, they can make an income. So we have to give them this right.
Ethiopia is co-hosting the Global Refugee Forum in Switzerland and sharing these experiences. The African Union hopes the forum will encourage other African countries to ratify continental instruments that defend the rights of those who are forcefully displaced and allow them to return home at their own will. In October, Human Rights Watch accused Tanzania of coercing Burundi refugees to return to their country, though Tanzania said the repatriation was voluntary.
For example, how you can oblige a refugee to return home? It's volunteer. If you think that the country is peaceful, the problem which put you out of your village, the problem is solved, you can return peacefully and to be quiet in your own country. If it is, they oblige you to go and the peace is not there, it's a violation of our convention and also is a human rights issue.
According to the African Union, the continent is home to 7.8 million refugees. It says the reasons behind their displacement remain untackled.
Governance is the big issue. So once governance fails, we end up with conflicts, and this conflict then leads to displacement. Now, that's one. Two, the failure for peace to prevail and be sustained on the continent. So when peace fails, then our countries are thrown into, turbulence in terms of crisis and conflict. And this then drives forced displacement of different kinds. Three, you have development failure, manifested by, among others, unemployment, poverty, inequality.
With global discussions taking part on the matter, refugees want to ensure their voices are being heard.
If they involve us in decision making, we can also contribute toward bringing peace back to our country, because we don't need to be refugees. It's a global word, but sometimes it oppresses us. We just need to be called Africans, human beings. That's enough for us.
The African Union says as the continent moves its theme to focus on silencing the guns in the year 2020, It will be a boost to efforts of ensuring that peace prevails in countries where people have been forced to flee. Colette Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's return to our headline story, where President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar have agreed to a new deadline to form a unity government in South Sudan. The two leaders are facing international pressure over faltering peace talks. The United States has imposed sanctions on two more South Sudanese government officials, the Minister of Cabinet Affairs and the Minister of Defense. Let's now cross over to CGTN's Julia Sun in New York for more on this. Julia, why is the U.S. targeting these specific individuals?
Well, the U.S. Treasury Department says these two particular people were blacklisted for perpetuating the conflict in South Sudan by obstructing the peace process. We heard from the U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary on Monday, and in his prepared remark, he explained the move by saying, and I quote, "We are designating two cabinet-ranking officials in the South Sudanese government for their role in inhibiting political unification, expanding the conflict, and profiting from South Sudan's war economy." All right, now let's talk about who these two people are and the specific charges. The two officials, like you said, are the Minister of Cabinet Affairs and the Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs. The Treasury is accusing the Minister of Cabinet Affairs of recruiting and organizing local militias to attack the opposition forces in South Sudan. And it's accusing the Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs of three charges. One, failing to remove forces from the battlefield as agreed. Two, stirring up violence with rival tribes. And finally, three, preparing militias for the possibility of renewed violence. Those are the reasons. Now, these sanctions freeze any U.S. assets held by these two ministers and prohibit Americans from doing businesses with them. The Hill newspaper, American newspaper Hill, is also noting that these sanctions are not meant to be permanent. After all, the U.S. wants, quote, a unity government and adequate implementation of the peace deal.
All right, so the U.S. wants peace in South Sudan, but why is the U.S., though, suddenly focused on South Sudan, considering the conflict has been ongoing for over 5 years, since 2013?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's well over 5 years, such a long-running conflict. This latest measure taken this week is an effort by the United States government to pressure South Sudan's politicians to form, again, a unity government. And it comes as Washington reevaluates its relationship with the African nation. Civil war broke out in the oil-producing South Sudan all the way back in 2013. And as you know, some 400,000 people have died in the conflict, which has triggered a famine and created Africa's biggest refugee crisis since the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. Some 3.7 million people are displaced. That is according to U.S. aid. Back in September 2018, the South Sudanese government and other parties signed a revitalized peace agreement. The two sides agreed to form a unity government by November 12th, and then they pushed that deadline by 100 days, which then prompted Washington to recall its ambassador. And this week, more than 30 days into the period, Washington says, nope, it has yet to see necessary steps to implement the peace deal. That's why it's using these sanctions to pressure the two sides to finalize the peace plan and form a unity government. The U.S. is hoping to bring the conflict to an end once and for all.
Right, Julia Sun joining us there from New York with that update. Thank you. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Somalia installs CCTV cameras in Mogadishu streets to boost security. And South Sudan's emerging storytellers show off work at a film festival.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
To Somalia now, where the government has embarked on installation of CCTV cameras across the capital, Mogadishu. The move aims to improve security in the central business district, according to security officials. The Horn of African state has witnessed increased attacks, mainly from Al-Shabaab in the recent past. Just last week, 10 people were killed and 11 others wounded when 4 Al-Shabaab gunmen attacked a hotel near the presidential palace.
The new CCTV cameras in the city can help in various areas like in any other city in the world. The new technology can help in beefing up security and other challenges on our roads, including accidents. So the cameras can help authorities curb these problems.
The new surveillance cameras installed in Mogadishu is a great step forward that I believe can help in dealing with security challenges in the country.
I do not think that the new CCTV cameras will be helpful in Mogadishu because there are no policies or regulations, and the motorists do not respect the traffic laws that are meant to guide them.
Well, Abdillahim Ibrahim Hassan, a security analyst, is now joining us from Mogadishu on more on this development. Abdillahim, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. What do you make of this latest move, though, to install CCTV cameras? Will it deter crime?
Thanks for having me. I would like to talk about the issue deeply, but the problem is not just about the CCTV camera. The CCTV camera is just about a technical issue, but the problem is bigger than that. In a country where the government has an armed opposition, you have to come up with a security strategy other than a technical issue, like coming up with a security policy. The problem in Somalia is not just started, it started more than 3 decades ago. And the security cameras is very crucial in the country, and it's so important to stay, but it is just a technical issue. It's like solving a big problem with just a small solution, or long-time problem. Just try to solve it, what is called a short-term strategy, and that's going to be very important in terms of security sector. But the problem is going to be how it's going to be implemented. It has already been strategized. It was planted, as we know. Last May, and the opposition, the armed opposition, ordered the current. Yes.
Right. I just want to come back to you, Abdillahim, because it is not just about crime that the CCTV cameras were installed for. Because, for example, the latest attack in Mogadishu was related to the militants who were reportedly camouflaged as security officials and even came in a police vehicle. How do authorities plan to go about manning of the control room to ensure it is secure?
Yes, it can deter crime. It has its own advantage, and the primary advantage is to deter the crime, and it can discourage the criminals who are planning to do this kind of activity, to dissuade what is called to not do their criminal activity early on. But this is going to help the security sector. But the biggest problem is going to be how this is going to be secured, because as we know, the CCTV cameras can be hacked easily, but we are hoping in the near future it is going to function well. And the CCTV camera has its own advantage and disadvantages. One of the advantages is it can discourage the criminals not to do their criminal activity, because when people feel they are being watched, it will be very difficult for them to continue their criminal activity. and their criminal behavior. Because every time when you see you are being watched, it is very difficult for you to do what you are planning to do if it is a crime. And there's a criminology theory that says, and the crime can happen everywhere. So the police has to be everywhere.
Abdillahim Ibrahim Hassan, a security analyst, joining us there from Mogadishu. Thank you. While the United Nations is calling for political and social change to address violence in West Africa, the special representative of the Secretary General says the region has been shaken by unprecedented violence in recent months. This comes just days after 71 soldiers were killed in an attack in Niger. Our correspondent Sarah Walton reports from New York.
Speaking at a briefing to the United Nations Security Council, Mohamed Ibn Chambers, the Special Representative for the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel, said last week's attack against a military camp in Niger still haunts the region. It's thought militants linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL have killed up to 230 soldiers in the Sahel region in the last 4 months. But Chambers said terror was not the only cause.
Endogenous factors of local conflicts have been documented. They include governance deficits, in particular poor management of natural resources, inequalities and marginalization, corruption, and the broader failure of governments to deliver its regalian function.
The heads of state in Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Niger and Burkina Faso have called for more international support. But the United States Deputy Ambassador told the Security Council that West African leaders were not doing enough to combat violence. The African Union said the situation requires more than just an armed response.
Addressing this issue will require a holistic approach that must involve political and socio-economic actions, such as strengthening the presence of the state in the peripheries, enhance the state's ability to deliver basic services, including the rule of law, education, infrastructure, and strong environmental policies to address climate change.
Chambers said the Security Council could play a decisive role in supporting such efforts in West Africa by closing the financial and supply corridors relied on by armed groups and using targeted sanctions as leverage in the region. Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
And let's now go to Rama Nyang for a look at the day's business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Nigeria's headline inflation has risen to nearly 12% in November due to border closures. And the IMF has agreed to lend $370 million to the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the program. Nigeria's headline inflation accelerated to just under 12% in the month of November as food prices in the country continue to soar in the wake of a decision by the government to close all trade on its land borders. Now, the move was aimed at curbing smuggling, but critics are now pointing out that it actually threatens free trade right across the region. Nigeria's central bank held its benchmark rate at 13.5% for the fourth straight meeting in November, saying at the time that the impact of the border closure on prices will be reactionary and, in its view, temporary. But the IMF also had another warning. It says that Nigeria will experience further inflationary pressures due to the excess liquidity that's sloshing about in its banking system. Elsewhere, the IMF has agreed to lend about $370 million to the Democratic Republic of Congo in order to bolster its currency reserves. The DRC's international reserves have fallen to critically low levels, and that has created an urgent balance of payments problem. The global lender says that a recent fall in commodity prices, new spending initiatives, and much looser spending oversight during the political transition are behind that decline. It will be sending staff to the Central African copper exporter through to the end of May to help prepare Congo for its first formal IMF loan program since 2012. Now, this next story is in agriculture, just probably not the way you're thinking about it. Zambia has legalized the production and export of marijuana purely for economic and medicinal purposes, authorities say. Now, the approval of export of this product was granted at a special cabinet meeting held on the 4th of December. Zambia's motivation is rooted directly in economic concerns. It's running a massive fiscal deficit and an enormous debt burden north of $10 billion. The country has already cut its 2019 growth forecast in September because of bad weather, which had affected both crop production and electricity generation too. Zambia joins a host of other nations around the world that have legalized or are considering legalizing cannabis to some degree, as attitudes towards this drug slowly change and investments in its medical benefits continue to grow. On to East Africa now. The first freight service of the standard gauge rail line from Nairobi to the just completed inland container depot some 120 kilometers away in Naivasha was launched on Tuesday by Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and a special envoy from China, Wang Yon. Now, the freight service will have 2 trains running on it every day. It should serve cargo destined for Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ideally, authorities expected to spur growth along that transport corridor. CGTN's Robert Nagila filed this report.
A new era. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and Chinese Special Envoy Wang Yon flag off the first freight train service to the just completed Naivasha Inland Container Depot. The service will have 2 freight trains daily to the inland depot, which is expected to ease congestion at the port of Mombasa and spur economic growth within the corridor.
As we mark the completion of the Naivasha Inland Container Depot and the commencement of the freight operations to Naivasha, it is our expectation that these new transport infrastructure facilities will significantly support and provide anchorage for the development of the Naivasha Industrial Park.
Built and funded by China at a cost of $1.5 billion, the 120-kilometer line, part of the Belt and Road Initiative, will serve freight cargo destined for Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo.
China and Kenya enjoy time-honored friendship and fruitful cooperation. As President Xi pointed out on many occasions, China always follows the principle of sincerity, real results and good faith, and that of pursuing the greater good and shared interest to forge ahead with solidifying with African countries.
Importers will pay $600 to haul a 20-foot container to Naivasha from the port of Mombasa, while a 40-foot container will cost between $850 and $910. From the ICD, cargo will be ferried by road to neighboring countries as the government embarks on plans to revamp the old meter gauge rail line to the border with Uganda. President Kenyatta commissioned the passenger service to Naivasha in mid-October. Robert Nagela, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
On to the tech world. Mara Phones, it's a subsidiary of the Mara Corporation, has announced that it's now exporting its Made in Africa phones to some 43 different markets. Its highest number of orders have come from Europe and the United States. The company launched smartphone manufacturing facilities in Rwanda and South Africa this year. Its Mara X and Mara Z, or Z models, depending on how you pronounce it, retail for about $190 and $130 respectively. While it's not the first to have marketed an African-made handset, it is the first, however, to produce and assemble the entire product from the phone's motherboard all the way to its packaging right here on the continent.
The sales are growing very well. They're growing very well. Actually, we were very surprised as well by the trend at the moment. We've been existent for the last 2 months or 2.5. But the great surprise was when you look at the exports size. It's not only Africa that is importing. We've now reached 46 countries until this Friday, the last Friday I mean, which gives us confidence that sales are moving very, very well. And the surprise behind it is that we also have the highest ranked country is actually Germany. We have also the UK, we have Switzerland, we have France. So it's not only Africa who's actually enjoying our funds, but it's also the rest of the world.
A joint agricultural trade exhibition organized by the Somali and Turkish business communities opened on Sunday in Mogadishu. Both sides showcased a whole range of products for potential exchange of supplies across both countries. A panel of experts from both countries also discussed the opportunities and challenges facing enterprises in the agricultural sector while providing a range of solutions. Senior government officials from both countries, including Somalia's Trade and Industries Minister Abdullahi Ali Hassan and the Turkish ambassador to the country, Mehmet Yilmaz, were present. Somalia recently started the export of agricultural produce, including bananas, to Turkey and a range of countries in the Gulf.
This agricultural expo is start of a long-term government of Somalia strategy to increase and modernize our agricultural produces in order to boost our export so as to balance it with our import. Currently, there is a big gap between our export and import that was resulted by the period of state of lawlessness in the country.
We are encouraging Turkish private sector to come to Somalia and invest in agriculture and fisheries. Some have already started their business in Somalia, and others still negotiate with the relevant ministries. We are also ready to enhance cooperation between the ministers of agriculture of both Turkey and Somalia for restructuring and modernization of agriculture in Somalia.
The Egyptian government has announced a $6.5 billion fund designed to support the country's manufacturing sector. The aim is to get the plants and the factories which were affected by Egypt's political upheavals all the way back to 2010 to get back on their feet. With the details, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
There are about 5,200 closed factories because of debts. The government is helping these factories to reopen.
It's a three-part initiative by the government and central bank. The first is to fund SMEs in the manufacturing sector. The second is to cancel debts and debt services on closed factories as long as they reopen and resume production. The third is about real estate and land for the factories.
This is an initiative by the government to focus on industrialization. Scores of factories and plants have stopped production due to the political and economic stabilities of the last decade. Amr Fattouh owns a polyplast factory that has managed to survive the recession, but he says it wasn't easy.
There were many problems facing businesses. It started with the two uprising and their fallout, then the burdens of economic reforms, also the devaluation of the Egyptian pound. It was tough at the beginning. There was no vision or plan for industries. Things are better now, but we must offer more facilities. Why should a businessman pay huge tariffs on purchasing equipment for his factory? He should be encouraged to import materials for production. The bureaucracy is a stumbling block too. It must be abolished so the producer and the state can benefit.
The government has allocated $6.5 billion for this plan.
Imagine 5,000 products that you can produce instead of importing. We have to support these companies. We should also protect the ones that are already operating to ensure they are sustaining any difficulties. This will encourage other foreign businessmen to invest in the country.
This week, the central bank has shelled out $2 billion to pay off debts and interests on over 5,000 factories. There's about another $6 billion to support the private sector in establishing new industries as well. The target is to establish over 5,000 industrial institutions in the next year. More production means more revenue, more exports, and more job opportunities. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
On to Boeing now. It has suspended production of its beleaguered 737 planes. The move is a relatively drastic step, but it comes after the Federal Aviation Administration said its review of the planes will continue into 2020. Now, Boeing's decision, made after months of cash-draining global grounding of its best-selling aircraft, worsens one of the most severe crises in the history of the century-old manufacturer. The measure presents further problems for airlines, which have lost hundreds of millions of dollars and cancelled thousands of flights without these fuel-efficient planes in their fleets. Now, Boeing says it doesn't plan to lay off workers at its Renton, Washington factory where the 737 MAX is produced. It says some of the 12,000 workers who are there at the moment will be temporarily reassigned to other parts of the business. I'll be taking a deep dive on that in a little more detail at the top of the hour. I'll be back at 1800 GMT. We'll be looking at Boeing's decision to essentially stop production of that jet. What's the impact on the bottom line for that particular company, but also for the airline industry as a whole? We'll explore that live from New York at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's ahead. South Sudan's emerging storytellers show off work at the film festival. Stay with us.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
The fourth edition of the Juba Film Festival has just concluded. It may not have had the glitz and glamour of similarly named industry events around the world, but the producers, the directors and actors in South Sudan are just as passionate about telling their own stories and celebrating each other's work. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy tells us more.
And I miss him.
23-year-old Chatiem Matiop, budding film producer, lives in the Kiriandongo refugee camp in neighboring Uganda.
And concentrate on your studies because we are the only people remaining in this family. So I want you to be strong and forget what has happened to the rest of the family members.
For him, taking part in this film festival is a dream come true. His Voice of Hope recently won Best Film on Peace Award at the Juba Film Festival.
I feel so excited that we have taken this award. Yeah, actually this is our first time here in South Sudan to win an award. And in the future we expect to do more, to spread the message of peace, love and unity to the people of South Sudan, to make our country a better place.
South Sudan has been embroiled in a civil war since 2013 after President Salva Kiir sacked opposition leader Riek Machar as vice president. The conflict has killed many and created Africa's biggest refugee crisis since the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. But those affected by the war, such as Matiop, have continued to use their talents to spread peace in the country, hoping for a better future for South Sudan.
When you have people like this who think ahead of their times, then you can say the future is bright. Because for us, my generation, we are interested in things that have nothing to do with this country. But for them, they're interested in things that will build this country. And I think this is a challenge for us as leaders. How do we make what people want and not what we want? This is what this film festival is about, and I'm very proud to be associated with it.
Peace negotiations are ongoing. Recently, South Sudan was given an additional 100 days to implement a peace agreement signed last year. The two leaders are currently meeting to iron out some of the contentious issues that have delayed the implementation of the peace accord. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
The world-famous Kirsten Bosch Botanical Gardens in Cape Town, South Africa, host a number of annual summer concerts during the month of December. The flagship event is the Christmas carols, which Cape Townians and tourists flock to in their numbers. CGTN's Renee Delcam joined in the festivities.
Carols at Kirsten Bosch started with a crowd of around 300 people 3 decades ago and now attracts over 5,000 people to each of its much-loved summertime events.
The event is there to sing carols in joy family, and that is what December and the Christmas holidays is all about. So we always encourage people to come and picnic, enjoy festivities, but just enjoy the atmosphere of Cape Town and Kirstenbosch Gardens.
Families and friends, armed with picnic baskets and Christmas hats, come from far and wide to sing along to their favorite Christmas carols and get into the festive mood. This year, the entertainment also included members of Cape Town Concert Brass and the Cape Town Male Voice Choir. Singing Christmas carols at the Kirstenbosch National Botanical Gardens in Cape Town in December has become a tradition in the past 31 years. And for many locals and tourists, it just wouldn't be Christmas without carols at Kirstenbosch.
This event brings people from all over the world. When they come on holiday, people look forward to coming to carols so they can start their holiday season by singing carols. And this event has become a event on the calendar of the Cape Tourism. So we really enjoy offering this event to the public of Cape Town and the world.
The vibe is absolutely amazing. I feel like I want to get up and dance, and yeah, it feels like Christmas. Absolutely feels like Christmas.
Definitely. Yes, this is a nice welcome to Cape Town to be here on my first night in the view. It's incredible, and yes, it's getting us in the spirit of Christmas, and it's lovely just to be surrounded with all the festivities and the music.
It's phenomenal being here in Kirstenbosch. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world.
It's nice because it's getting us into the Christmas spirit, so I'm really enjoying myself.
I really like the Christmas carols because some of my favorite songs are playing, and it's a nice experience.
And in the spirit of giving and sharing during the festive season, all proceeds from the Carols at Kirstenbosch event goes to charity every year to help improve the lives of the needy in and around Cape Town. Renee Delcalm, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Hosts South Africa select 20 players for specialized training ahead of the 2020 ICC Under-19 World Cup.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We begin your sport with cricket news, where host nation South Africa has selected 20 players who will represent the country at the ICC Under-19 World Cup. The squad is set to undergo an extensive and specialized 13-day talent acceleration program ahead of the tournament that runs from the 17th of January to the 9th of February next year. CGTN's Julie Shire has more from Pretoria.
Bad weather did not dampen spirits when the South African Under-19 Talent Acceleration Program was forced indoors for their final preparations.
The weather's been a bit of a blessing for us because we've managed to sit with the boys and have conversations about what we're looking for, what kind of culture we're trying to instill, what is the plan going forward and how we're going to go about playing our cricket. And then I think we've also been able to engage them on a physical level, mental level and an emotional level. So there have been lots of positives and we're really happy with what we've achieved in the last few days.
The 12-month selection process reached its climax at the Cricket High Performance Centre in Pretoria.
I think we're very well balanced. I don't think there's an area where we feel that we're not strong. It's just a matter of getting out there on the day and executing the plans and sticking to the KPIs and the requirements of how we want to go about our business.
I think we're in a really good space as a team. In the past, we've definitely been a more bowling side. I think our bowling has been really good, but this week's shown our batsmen can do the job. We've given our bowlers a run for the money, so batting's looking strong and we're just looking to complete the squad.
As part of preparation for the home World Cup, South Africa will take on their Indian counterparts in a 3-match one-day international series. The youngsters then play 4 matches in a youth quadrangular series against India, Zimbabwe and New Zealand.
In the build-up, we want to keep growing. We want to keep adding an extra brick every single game, every single session that we have together as a team. In terms of expectations, being a South African and loving winning and being very competitive, we'd like to win. We'd like to give people something to smile about. It's just a matter of going out and doing what we need to do.
Expectation from our side is definitely to go out and win it, especially we've got the home advantage. So we know things haven't gone well in the past, but we spoke a lot about putting all of that behind us and focusing on what's to come.
With the World Cup fast approaching, players are focused and determined on winning and are confident they can add the 2020 World Cup to their trophy cabinet. Julie Shire, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa. Now, Senegal swept the men and women's gold medals at the second edition of the 2019 Dakar ATU Sprint Triathlon African Cup on Sunday. Nearly 80 triathletes took part in the continental competition, divided into the junior age group and elite classifications of the swimming, cycling and running competition. The international event drew competitors from across Africa, as well as Turkey, Ireland, Hungary, Ukraine, the Netherlands, Chile, Syria and Russia. Organizers believe the event acts as a preparation stepping stone as they gear up to host the 2022 Youth Olympic Games, while athletes earn points from the event in the run-up to next year's Olympic Games. Senegal also won gold in the men's under-18 category, while Niger won the women's race.
I am very happy to have won this title. Last year, I competed in the African Zone 2 Championship and was placed second. While this year, I have managed to beat all my competitors and won the trophy. So I am really satisfied with this result.
I prepared well and just repeated what I learnt in training. And that's what helped me win.
It was a really fun race, and the course was very good. It was hilly and the water was nice and warm as well compared to Ireland, because it's very cold in Ireland. And the support was amazing. The people around here are really nice, and it was a really well organised race.
In Spain, champions Barcelona welcome arch-rivals Real Madrid in their delayed El Clasico on Wednesday night in a game that could be crucial in the La Liga race. Only goal difference separates the two sides at the top of the table, meaning that victory for either would put some daylight between them and their greatest rivals as the midway point of the season approaches. Both clubs will hope that matters on the pitch rather than the political unrest of it, which caused the original fixture to be postponed, make the headlines. And for both teams, it is also a chance to get back to winning ways